Okay, I think I'm live on YouTube. Yeah. All right, I think I'm live on. I'm also live on TikTok. I'm on live. Yeah, I think we got a lot of a couple of people with us on TikTok. Yeah, were you able to also get in on TikTok? All right, because if you are there, then definitely we can have the side of the music. Do you, by any chance, have like an airport or something on? Provide you what? Okay. Yeah, you're there. Yeah, you're there. You're there. Hi, everybody. You're welcome to Beyond the Pulpit. This is the Voices Beyond the Pulpit, and I want every one of us to really understand that this is not just another sermon that you are here to listen to. It is not even another performance that you are here to listen to. This is where we have honest conversations. This is where you can join us to talk about things that are happening all around you in the church, ministry leadership, some of the struggles and hustles that ministry leaders we face severally, and some of their backstories that most of us, especially pastors, don't talk about when we are on the pulpit right there. Don't forget that the pulpit is high up there, but the man up there also has a struggle, also has a story to tell. So what we are here to do is to actually step, outside the formalities of the pulpit, outside the formalities of the church or the lectures that we have, and we're just about to get really real, unfiltered realities of ministry, some of the pressures that we face, some of the hidden struggles that we face, some of the questions burning through your mind, some of the many leaders, some of the burdens that we carry severally. So we are just here to share some of the stories, and because this is the truth behind every strong voice up there on the pulpit, there is a human being, and we are all human. Um, I don't need to start boggling with you with some of the things that goes on the social media, especially the days and the years of the text that we have right now. And some of those things, you realize that once the Christian faith filters, a kind of news, it goes viral. Once a man of God or a servant of God, comes up, there's a news about them, especially in the negativity. Some of those things, they just go viral like that. So we just came together to wonder, our pastors, our leaders, our bishops, our ministry spearheads, are the angels? And the honest answer is a no. And so that is why we said, okay, there might be something beyond the pulpit. There might be something beyond the perfection that a whole lot of us that we see out there. And so that is why we are coming together for this podcast. So today, now, very first episode is the debut of this program, where we're going to be talking about, the real cost of ministry as pastors. There is a weight of the ministry, what life and what leaders, what we don't say on the pulpit, and these are just things that happens to us. So I just want us to have this conversation. So if you're a pastor, you are a leader, you are a worker in ministry, or even someone trying to understand, the people who lead you or the people that they lead. So this is the right conversation for you. And so I will tell you that you're welcome once again. So let's go beyond the pulpit. Let's go beyond the three-piece suit. For the most part, most of you who know me, you see me on Sundays or on Bible study days when I have, dressed down. But there is so much more to Yomi than what you see. There's so much more to Pastor Femi than what you see. So this platform is to just talk about some of those things. And let me let you know that we are not here to start bashing people, start talking down on churches or ministries or whatever leadership that we have all around. We are just trying to make impact the way forward. Yeah, we highlight the problems. We're going to be talking about the problems, the issues, some of the strains, but preferring solutions and the way forward, it's very, very imminent here. So I will say again from my hand that welcome to Voices Beyond the Pulpit. God bless you. Thank you all for joining us, everyone joining us on TikTok, on YouTube. We see you all. Thank you so much. We got a couple of people on YouTube right now. On TikTok, God bless you. On Facebook, Instagram, God bless you. Thank you for being together. Again, this is not going to be a sermon again. So if you have your questions, you can just ask your questions, and we can just pick it from there. Pastor Femi, would you want to just kick off? Um, Pastor Femi, okay. There's something I quickly want to say here. I'm going to be throwing that question to you right as we kick off, and that is the premonitions, the presumptions, some of the assumptions that people have about the ministry that is not actually true. I don't know. There are several. There's scores of them. When people talk about ministry, when people talk about um, church, when they talk about ministry in general, there are these assumptions. So maybe we should just use that as an icebreaker right now. That for you, what are some of the assumptions that you could pick, from what people think about the ministry, but those things are not actually true? Right. Mm, right. 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 It's becoming the word whereby everybody also believes that God has frontline ministry. I remember those days when we were in the missions college. One of the teachers over there will always say, "Hey, are you sure God has called you into this service? Because practically, when you're in the missions college, you are being trained into frontline ministry." So, Pastor Femi, I want to believe that I heard you right when you were talking about some other ministries that God would use people in some other areas of the kingdom service, that God could use people aside even their much talked about fivefold ministry. That's the ministry of the apostles, of the evangelists, of the teachers, pastors, and the prophets. But unfortunately, a whole lot of people, even when God is calling them into some other parts of the ministries that are not really the front line, they're not on the spotlight, people don't readily believe that God has called them into other ministries or things that God would have them do aside the regular spotlight ministry. And that's why you see people that God has called into the help ministry. They in a prophetic, they want to be in the teaching ministry or the apostolic ministry. And other thing that I see a whole lot of people do these days is pushing into these two ministries, the prophetic and the apostolic ministry. everywhere, not just in Africa, not just in America. Everyone wants to brandish the name apostle, and you would wonder someone that just answered the call or just had the road to Damascus experience in just a year or two or three or maximum of 5 years, they're already brandishing the name apostle. Sometimes I wonder who taught them, who brought them that idea that um, has given them an illusion of what ministry is all about. Because there is the street called straight, there is the place of whoever will eventually be an apostle of the Christ must have a level of tutelage, a level of tutoring, like you know, and must have a level of experience, and must have had, um, I mean, records, must have had stories and history, contained in events in their lives. So, and that's why the prophetic ministry is in the marketplace these days, because of course the Bible talks about at the end of the word that people will get teachers for themselves. There are several denominations in the Christian faith that almost everyone is a prophet. Almost everyone is a prophet. Almost everyone has a divine call to give a message, especially a prophetic message to the world. But like you rightly said, Pastor Femi, God has called every believer, and the first call that God has called every believer is the call to Himself. When Jesus came in His earthly ministry, one of the foremost thing He did was to disciples to Himself, and they had to be with Him for a couple of years before He sent them out, as apostles, as missionaries in the world. But these days in ministry, one of the assumption is that once God calls you, He has called you to start a church. And you saw people who never really had a relationship with God. They've not really been with Him. That scripture says He called them so that they might be with Him. They might learn of Him. They might understand the ways of the kingdom before they are sent out. People really want to stay under tutoring, under mentorship these days. And the next thing you see is everyone, especially these days of the technology and all of that, um, everyone wants to get on the social media. Everyone wants to talk about things. Everyone wants to pray online. Everyone wants to prophesy online and things like that. Ministry, I would say, is it's you have to grow it. You don't have to you cannot meet it grown. It is developed. It is grown. It is not something that you just meet already grown. And I think that is another area that people are really getting it wrong these days. I just pray that the Lord will help us and the Lord will grant us better understanding. Ministry is not easy for the legacies that we see today, for the movement, the revivers that we see today. For the most part, people's blood dropped for it. Jesus Christ's blood also dropped for it. The much celebrated preachers in the world today, they have history contained in events and things that had happened in their lives. So it takes patience. So those assumptions that you have to start ministry, like I tell people, even in marriage, for the most part, any married that could survive the first 10 years, man, I'd really tried, because they have a leverage, a good percentage that you're going to survive much more time. So for a ministry that we don't know where you're coming from, we don't even know when you met with Christ, your encounter story, we don't know your salvation story, then we just met you already grown. Then there's going to be a question mark on your ministry. These things are very important. Um, I don't know if Pastor Femi really wants to say some other thing. Yes, sir. Yeah. Those days it wasn't fanciful. It wasn't beautiful. Of course. Of course. Right. Right. Pastor Pastor, something just came to my mind. And I want to ask you. I don't want to be like I'm asking you too many questions, but as these things pop up, I'll just like talk about it. And there's a fact that, and I'm going to answer that question too for myself. That would be, if people are to see behind the scene of your life and ministry, what's that one thing they'll be shocked about? As a pastor, I know you've been in ministry for years. You've been in ministry for years, and I thank God for your life. We celebrate you in your own right, and by the grace of God, you are a successful minister in one of the most viable churches in North America, in the city of Utah. And by the grace of God, my humble self, been in ministry for decades too. God has really helped where we are. You in Utah, myself in Phoenix, Arizona. What would be that one thing that behind the scene, behind the glamour, the light, sound check, behind the semantics and everything that we talk about, in the church, behind the public impressions? What is that one thing that when people get to know and understand about your life and your ministry, they'll be shocked? That's gonna be the first on my list, anyways. Pastor, you are too honest. We want honest answers, but I think you are too. Maybe if I'm gonna say that, I'm not gonna say it that way. It's okay. Of course, of course. So you were too familiar with the altar. And I remember you grew in the redemption city. You saw everything. You saw senior pastors, the big men that we celebrate. Whoa. Right. Hmm. Hmm. I of course. Right. Really. Really. Uh, Go ahead. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Pastor, what thing for me? Okay, for me, yeah, for me, I would say, yeah, for me, I would say that ministry things become so lonely for me, and I'll tell you. I mean, to be very honest with you, things become lonely. I'm an extroverted, and for the most part, when I tell people that it becomes lonely for me, people uh, that couldn't be. Maybe because of the face that I put up outside. Maybe because of how friendly I could be with people. So people technically do not really understand that I have struggled sometimes, even with um, myself. I have struggles with loneliness. Then, because a whole lot of people also see us outside as successful, especially economically and financially. Did you know that a lot of times, now I'm talking about myself, and I know that this applies to a whole lot of ministers of the gospel. It happens to so many people, Christians, even those that are not, excuse me, in the frontline ministry. We struggle financially. That's one truth. We still struggle financially. We struggle to pay a whole lot of bills because the kingdom service comes with a whole lot of things and bills. You understand? It's just one pivotal aspect of kingdom service. When I tell people that, hey, I'm not as rich as you think I am, a lot of people don't want to agree. They don't want to accept that. But that's just the truth. That's just one thing that I wish that people would just agree with, except for people who understand how the ministry works. So, that being said, one of the reasons why people will not readily believe, when we say we struggle financially, that ministers, they struggle financially, is that ministers, we don't hear our views. We don't we bottle up. When we are hurt emotionally, spiritually, financially, we bottle up. We don't want people to readily see us as weak. We don't want the perception that hey, we are throwing things out there. So as a matter of truth, we bottle things up. But a whole lot of ministers actually struggle financially, myself inclusive. And one another reason why people don't want to agree is because almost on monthly basis, I run and I do projects that are very heavy. Sometimes we run outreaches that are in the millions. Sometimes we run outreaches that are in the thousands of dollars. So, it's going to be hard for a lay person, someone who doesn't really understand the pattern of the ministry, to agree with you when you say, oh, I am struggling financially. Someone will ask you, but I thought you just, dole out some thousands of dollars a couple of days ago or just yesterday. People in the church, people in our circle, they have issues and they come around us. Um, Even when we don't have, the box to give them, we still try our best possible to be compassionate. We go the extra mile. You know, I've had stories. I can tell you. I mean, several stories of how much I wish some of the parishioners, some of the people that I pastored, would understand that, hey, guys, I don't really have this. But because when they ask, I just do the five loaves and two fishes miracle somewhere, you know, and they are sorted. So it's kind of hard. So it could be unbelievable sometimes. You can imagine that. I remember there was a time a member, ran to me and my wife and was asking for some food, and we provided this, woman the food. But did you know? I'm talking about stories of years ago in Africa. We were on the mission field, and we had a way. We didn't even show to the woman. Mind you, before this person came, my wife and I were discussing on how to put a meal on our table with our children. But when the woman came, and she spoke to us and all of that, we had to go. We didn't even say, "Oh, we did not have, or we don't have it." I just told my wife we have to do something. And it was like we went to get food on loan to make sure we settled the issue. I mean, the woman was having. She was so grateful, she was so appreciative, and she left with joy because we, as a family, as a family in the church, we had already made up our mind that we are not. No one comes into our house hungry that will go out hungry. We sorted the woman, and the woman left, and after the whole thing, we went back to our own hunger. Up till now, except if this woman is watching this broadcast. I'm telling you stories of well over decades ago, except if she will now realize, oh, this was actually what happened the other day. But the truth is, these are some of the hidden things that if people actually discover about us as pastors, that pastors we appear good, we appear clean, we appear, we're well dressed, the sermon must be preached, everything must go well on Sunday, the sound must come out, the lights must come on, the hair must come on, no matter what, even pastors, I know pastors and God's servant that go to the extent of getting loans and to making sure that the kingdom service, the kingdom work progresses. These are some of the struggles that happens to pastors, um, and I this is another opportunity to let people know that there are several things that only if you know about the so much adored and so much um, extolled, servants of God, you'll be in shock. Pastor, I give you another one. When news come to the open about pastors, falling into some kind or diverse kind of sins, you know, why would people be surprised? Is it the fact that they see God in, they see the man as God, or they just see men of God? Because the altar is exalted, but there is still a man before a man of God. And that's one thing that when people, another thing that when people actually discover about men of God, they will be shocked. Some of the atrocities, some of the things that happens, behind the scenes. If you really understand the life and the ministry of so many servants of God these days, if a whole lot of us would not want to get close to them. You were saying something, Pastor, the other time about because you were born into a priest's family, you were raised there. Almost every day of your life, what you saw um, was pastors, was the church, was the lectern, was you really have anything outside of that. You saw it all. You were too familiar with the altar. You were too familiar with the things of God. So, as a matter of fact, you didn't want to be a pastor. There's another thing that happened to me a couple of years ago. Uh, there was a particular lady who was a pastor's kid. So we met. We were supposed to get married, and we met, and we were dating. It was a good one until the day I told her. I said I was ready to surrender unto God, and I'm just ready to follow what God had been telling me, which is to go into the ministry full time. I was working as a journalist at that time, and you know, she pretended I was okay with her, but afterwards, she told me point blank that she had already told herself that she would never get married to a pastor. I told her why. She said because of how she grew as a pastor's kid. Yeah, she told me on Christmas Day they had nothing to it. On Christmas Day, when they're preparing for Christmas, the mom would remove some of the window blinds as the curtain in the house because the mom was a seamstress. She would remove the curtains in the house and she would make that into Christmas clothes for them. You know, they were really, really, really poor. And because of that, ministry wasn't a fancy to this lady. So when I told her I was going into full time ministry, she dropped the ball. She bolted out on me. It was a really big outbreak. Oh, come on. And she said she wasn't going to go again. But I thank God she left anyways. And that's a story for another day. So these are just some of the things some of the burdens that a whole lot of people don't understand about ministry. And but when they get to discover, they're in rude shock, you know. I know that some of our watchers and our listeners right now, they are really, really going with us and they're really, really enjoying the conversation. Another thing I want to pop up right now is some of the emotional and spiritual burnout that we have. It's part of the struggles that we have as ministry leaders. And you have some of this emotional and spiritual burnout, but you still have to show up. Pastor, have you had a time like that? You don't feel like going to church. You are the pastor, you're the lead pastor of the church. I know I know it still happens to you this day. Mm, Was the lady in the church? Was the lady a member of the church? Okay. Right. You're there. You're there, Pastor. You're on my TikTok. Right. 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 And that brings me to the question, Pastor. Would church leaders, would ministers of God be allowed to just be human looking at today's church culture? Because it's becoming so, I mean, it's becoming harder every day that even ministers now are to like to pretense and just living like the church wants them to live. I give you my word. Um, I'll say it again. Church leaders, they are humans. Mistakes. They commit errors. You know. Okay. I've had to severally, those days, especially when I was much younger in ministry, I've had to really control myself, especially when it comes to the relationship between myself as a pastor and some of the church members who are like opposite sex. And some of these guys, of course, they're intentional about coming around you as their pastor, especially when you're a young pastor. You know, um, people don't just want to hear that. They don't want to listen when it's like, oh, a pastor falls into some kind of temptation, or a pastor falls into some kind of fornication or adultery, as the case may be. How do we start engaging in this kind of communication? Because personally, I found myself in those circles sometimes. Those days, not really anymore now, because when I was a child, I behaved like a child, but now God is on the throne. So the maturation is there. But I'm saying that, can the church just allow pastors to be human sometimes and not always perceive pastors as a semi god, or like someone who is too celestial beyond um, what God has made us to be. Apostle Paul says there are things that I want to do that I don't do. And there are the things that I really don't want to do is what I do. Now, for context, that could mean several things. You know, sometimes pastors just want to be a little social, but when you bring that up, people be like, "No, you're a pastor. You're not supposed to do that." Sometimes I just want to dress down. For instance, I don't want to appear in my suit to church. But because of the expectation of the church, the orientation of the church, I can't just appear that way. No, I'm not talking about the extremes this time. I'm not talking about a pastor going to the club this time. I'm not talking about a pastor, mismanaging, unintentionally mismanaging, church funds and all of that. No, no, I ain't talking about that. I'm talking about the normal day life. The normal day life. Pastors want to go on vacation. Pastors want to have some time, some social um, gathering with friends. Pastor want to go do few things that a normal person will do. Of course. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Right. 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 Yes, sir. Yes. Right. Hmm. Right. Accompanying. Yeah. Hmm. That's true. Yes, sir. Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Mm. Right. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Yes. Yes. Right. 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 Hmm. Yes. Yes. That's true. Right. Right, sir. Right. 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 And that's it. Right. Right. Yep. Right. 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 Hmm. 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 Gotcha, sir. Right. Hmm. Right. Yes. Of course. Right. Of course. Yes, sir. Hmm. Right. Hmm. Talking about people's position where these things are concerned. I'm beginning to ask myself, ministers and church leaders, people on the pulpit, we there are a lot of pressures, man of God. Except if we're gonna, want to sugarcoat things, there are a lot of pressures. So one of the things that always come to my mind is, which I've had the opportunity to like discuss those things with several people, other minister friends, and all of that. The pressure that comes from serving God, from doing the work of the ministry. Where are the areas that these things are actually coming from? Is it the people we lead? Is it the culture? Um, is it ourselves? Because there's possibility that we ourselves are giving ourselves this pressure. Because sometimes you look at the rat race, you look at their desires of so many people, you will see that even when the Lord is not mounting as much pressure, people are mounting so many pressure on themselves. In Africa these days, I don't see much of that, where we are in America. But in Africa, we see a whole lot of the much celebrated ministers, and even the ones that are not on the Hill list. Everyone wants to build the largest cathedral. Everyone wants to have the best sound. Everyone, and in these days now, people are using, some of the stadiums for their event. People are competing. Ministers are competing. So that's why I brought in that idea that is the pressure even coming from ourselves? I mean, the self or the people. You get what I'm saying, sir? So these things are there. Thank God you are here, sir. I had to send an invite on TikTok so that we can both be here, and every other person who wants to like be part of this conversation can now um, send in their we can invite them. Anyways, oh sorry. Oh, Pastor, are you still with me? Right. I know that there's a little glitch there. I don't know what's really happening. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I was saying that the competition is just too much, and the pressure is coming from several things. People, too. I mentioned people, the rate at which people approach the pulpit, the altars, the and the men God has placed on the altar is also something that had called for concern even these days. Um, Sometimes the idolizing of the men of God and the servants of God, um, and that's where it's coming from. The people, the way people relate with men of God, the way people even talk about the men of God, the way people compare men of God, the way people the people thing is just there. You get what I'm saying? The people thing is just there. Then when we look at the culture today, is it also a factor that is causing some of this pressure that the ministers of God on the pulpit also face? And the number three is the minister himself. You understand? No man receives anything except it is given from above. When I say this to people who care to listen to me, I tell them I don't think I've one day prayed to be extremely rich, to be extremely powerful, to be extremely influential. I just want to be comfortable. I just want to be satisfied. And I want to, and when I say satisfaction, I'm not talking about the dissatisfaction that needs to be satisfied daily. I'm talking about the little that God has afforded me, being able to have it. I share with people severally, and I tell them, I say, um, if I am to retain everything that God has given unto me, then maybe I'm going to appear wealthier than this. But for the most part, I believe that whatever God has given unto us is by grace and by His mercy. So what I do is, as it comes in, by the grace of God, I'm like a channel through which God does some of these things. I'm like a channel. I'm not a tunnel, because a tunnel, stuck things. When it flows in, it stays there, and that's why a tunnel stinks. But a channel, things flows through a channel. And where God knows that, oh, you are the kind of minister or you're the kind of person that when it gets to you, it gets to some other people, then I can assure you that there's a way God releases much of kingdom resources to you. So for me, I believe that the pressure is coming from people. The pressure is coming from the culture. The pressure is coming for us, from ourselves. You know, I've heard some comments from several ministers who talk about the latest sound, the latest this, the latest lights, the latest technology they want to, install in their worship places, and knowing fully that God does not dwell in the physical place. God dwells in our heart. These are conversations that when you begin to talk about things like this, maybe in gathering of, large gatherings of ministers, you will have more antagonists than protagonists. You have more people who are gonna like be, talking you down or shushing you down than people who are actually gonna be supporting what you're trying to say. Did you know statistics shows that a greater percentage of ministers of the gospel have high blood pressure, they're hypertensive, because the pressure is much. So I don't know the ratio anyways, but I know that this pressure is coming from the church culture, because there have been a serious shift in the church culture over decades. The number two, it's coming from the people. The number three, it's coming from the minister, because a lot of times the minister pressurizes themselves. I don't know if you want to just dot on that. Yes. Yes, sir. Yes. Yes, sir. Hmm.
I cannot say that.
Yes, sir.
Would they still answer the call saying,
Mhm.
I had God?
Yes, sir.
Because I believe God is speaking to me and I know He's leading me this way so I can preach the gospel, I can do the work of God. But I come to tell you, maybe many of them wouldn't have answered that call.
Mm-hmm.
But to the glory of God right now, yeah, God is blessing and things have changed. Um, you know, pastors can wear good suit now.
Of course.
Not the one that will fold up at the back of at the back and you don't even know that it's folded. You know, but now pastors can use use nice house, nice place. Then some of those pastors are doing business don't even know what youth ministry used to be
Yes.
back in those.
Yes,
You
sir.
understand what I'm saying now?
Yes, sir.
Now, so but must we now, as Paul said, that we say that we get a sense and ask them to go to allow.
Right. Right, sir. Hmm. Yeah. Of course. Of course. Right. 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 Hmm. Yes, sir. Is packaging it should packaging be a thing in the kingdom? Or should we just use the word branding? Please don't get me wrong, Pastor. I'm not saying that the light is sound. You and I, we are music people. We are sound people. We are light people. But the culture that we have today is the culture of people don't even worship God without the sounds, the light anymore. The hearts are no more there. Even music is there. The latest technology is there for music, but unfortunately, the heart is no more there. So if we say branding, should branding overshadow our ambassadorial duties and responsibilities to God, and our fellowship, the true worship to God. Don't forget that John chapter 4 talked about the fact that this worship thing we're talking about, there is going to be a time when there's not going to be any building any longer. There's not going to be all of those light sounds check, the smoke machines. There's not going to be any of that again. But those that will not worship Him will worship Him in spirit and truth, and knowing that the nature of God is actually is not human, is a spirit. So any worship that is out of that context is not just worship, even if they spend billions of dollars on this, on the sounds, on the venue, or whatever thing that they have going on. And I am not castigating our churches. My church have the sounds, and by the grace of God, one of the best of sounds and lights and all of those things. But we also try to like guide against focusing on this branding thing, signature, which has become the in thing today. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Right. Yes. Mm. Right. Yes, sir. Right. Right. The response you're getting from people. That's true. That's true. Exactly. Exactly. That's true. Yes, sir. Right. That's true. That's true. Hmm. That's it. Right. 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 Wow. Yeah. Right. Right. That's true. That's true. That's true. Right. That's it. Yes. 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 Yes, sir. That's true. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I totally agree with you, Pastor. And um, there's this scenario which is not always a pulpit affair. It's a beyond pulpit affair. And that's a scenario that happens to almost all ministers when there are expectations to give answers. But the truth is, you have no answers. Pastor, have you been in that situation before? Like, there are expectations maybe from parishioners, maybe from members, from people that you mentor. There are expectations to get answers from you. But then anything, they just, things are happening and they look to you for an answer. Let me give you an example. Sometimes, we don't have all the answers all the time, man of God. We don't always have all the answers. And yeah, and because of the church culture, the way people are being, they want answers from us. Have you ever been in that situation whereby you got no answer, even when you pretend, to have answers, even when you don't have any? Now, these are realities. These are just realities of the ministry, and it happens to so many pastors. Even sometimes when they're on the spot, or sometimes they're not on the spot. I give you another example. There was a day a member of my church back when I was in Africa gave birth, and it was a good one. On there, after the naming of the child, or just around the naming of the child, the Christian of the child, they went for circumcision. It was a male child. I don't know what happened. Maybe the nurse missed something, so the child started bleeding from the genitals. Oh man, it was a very terrible situation. So they called me, and I had to come. The child had bled so much that I prayed. I remember. I mean, the scene is actually playing back to me right now. That I knelt down, lay my hands on the baby. A 7-day-old baby. I lay my hands on the baby, and the parents, the young couple, stood there helpless. They want answers at that point. Do I have answers? No, God does. But I still have to pray. I prayed. I prayed, and it was their first child. I prayed and I cried my eyes out. I was telling God, God, please, could you just do this for me? You remember the way it happened to David, after the death of Uriah, and the boy, the child that came from that union, that illicit union, passed on. That kind of feeling. I had that kind of feeling, and I was telling God, God, please, would you just help me? Bring this boy back to life, this child back to life. But hey, the boy didn't come back to life. While we were even taking the baby to be buried, after several prayers, hours of prayers, sweating, something was telling me, yeah, there's going to be an answer. The baby was going to come back to life. Well, the baby didn't come back to life. I'm sharing my experience this time around, and I know several ministers too. There are times that issues happen between the husband and the wife. Very deep issues. That cause strain in the family, and they want answers from you. Things that happened. Oh, the government had come to pull down the church structure, and they want answers from you. The members are looking up to you. So, it has happened to me severally, and these are some of the issues, struggles that ministers they go through. But people don't understand, when the rent is due, but there is no money, there is no funds to renew the rent, or to pay the mortgage of the church. People want answers from you, but as a pastor, sometimes I pretend I have answers. Would you share your side of that story? Right. Of course. Right. Right. Yeah. Right. 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 We're prophesy part. Yes, sir. So is that not gonna sound for me? I believe that's just gonna sound like, you know, I know people might want to say, "Oh, that's egoistic," but just telling people that you don't know, right, right, hmm, right, 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 hmm. But there are biblical doctrines, though. Yeah, man-made doctrines. Yeah, yeah, which helps. It helps administration management. They are not necessarily. Yeah, they're not necessarily biblical doctrines. The biblical doctrines are different. Yeah, the hardness of your heart. Yeah, right, 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 right. So where do we draw the line? What do we draw the line in this whole thing? Hmm. Yes, sir. Hmm. 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 Yeah, that's true. That's true. That's true. Yes, sir. Hmm. Hmm. Yes, sir. What did they say? Oh, yeah. You can just send it on the comment if you want to come in. We can just bring you in quickly. That's true. Hmm. That's true. Yes, sir. That's true. Yes, sir. Of course. Of course. That's true. That's that's true. Yeah, that's. I think that solves it. And that's where to just draw instead of just giving out, just throwing words out there or doing things or manipulating people. Because we live in a world right now where so many ministers are in the business of manipulation, and there are several ways and several shades that these things come. I think this week I started discussing mentorship, which is a major thing in ministry. It's something that, yeah, likely we talk about it on the pulpit, but beyond the pulpit, there are still some very gray areas in mentorship. And I did a part one and a part two of mentorship, but one area that I think I didn't really which is going to be the part three. I did a part one, part two, which I dealt with the mentees. And the last part, I told people that I'm going to be talking about the mentors themselves, especially mentors when it comes to their duties and mentors that turns to tormentors, you know. So when we talk about mentorship in ministry, this is one area that I believe that I'd really breached. I'd really created ministry gaps, you know. Um, Maybe it's the case that the younger ones coming up don't want to submit themselves to be well mentored, or everyone is just looking for selected mentorship. Like I was discussing earlier in the week, that a whole lot of younger generations in ministry right now, they carefully, skillfully, and tactically choose people they really want to mentor them. You know, yeah, because mentorship is very biblical. Um, young people look for people of influence to mentor them in ministry, in business. You know, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong in getting people who have been successful in whatever thing you want to do to mentor you, but sometimes, especially in the ministry, you know, what we see as success may not actually be success in ministry. You know, um, the ephemeral things, the empirical things, and the display of wealth that so many ministers are have delved into these days, yeah, you know, make people to actually allude that to success. So in ministry, you see the wealthy pastors, in quotes, the wealthy in quotes pastors, they have more sons of the prophet than the ones who look like they're still struggling in the ministry, or they're just coming up in ministry, or they've been in ministry for so long, but there is very little or nothing to show physically, even though God has really helped them with wisdom, with buffer strength, in the spiritual realm, in really, really, there are people that heaven recognizes, spiritually, but physically, they may not have the big cathedrals, they may not have the big lights and sounds and all of that. You rarely see young people, or you rarely see people come up to them to say, I want you to mentor me. You understand? Now, what are we going to say about these things? What does the mentorship look like beyond the titles and the appearance and the physical things that we see? And this is one area I know that has really caused ministry gaps. Mentorship. People want you see some people that will say, oh, I don't want a small man to mentor me. I want a big man. So beyond the title, beyond those names, those titles, those prefixes, what does mentorship look like in ministry? Beyond the appearances, beyond the convoys, beyond the cars, the fleet of cars, beyond the cathedrals, beyond the big concert, beyond the three-piece suit, beyond the security man, what does mentorship really look like? Yes. Yes, sir. Mm, right. Right. The young. Yeah. Right. 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 To do. Right. 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 Oh no, sorry. Do you think it's possible for people to I think I differ a little there. The reason why I'm saying this is because there's a sharp contrast between a mentor and a role model. For me, for yes. Yeah. Yeah. Elisha, Caleb, Joshua, and Joshua mentored Caleb. Mm. All of them, yeah. Right. Right. That's where I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. There must be a physical connection. There must be an intentional relationship. Yeah. Right. Yes, I agree with. I think I agree on that. I was about going there. I was about going there. How about people and pastors who act successful or who are seen as successful, but they will tell you, I don't have a mentor. I don't submit to nobody. No one mentored me. Mhm. A whole lot of them, unfortunately, a whole lot of them, they're just being cynical because you see them go about with flocks of folks around them, mentees, but they will tell you nobody mentors them. Do we call that pride? Yes, sir. Right, right, right. That's it. Right, right. So, yes. Hmm. Of course, if whether or not their fathers are known, they still have fathers. Pastor, there is a pain of mentorship, and that area we've spotted on the pride aspect of mentorship. People not wanting to submit to mentorship, which is for me is a landmine. It's just a time bomb waiting to detonate, because as soon as things get south, then it detonates. So, but this other part is where I have discussed in the course of this week, the two-part series that I wrote about, and that is the part of people choosing a mentor for gains, for personal and unselfish gains, for what they tend to get so that they can fatten up. Or things they just perceive people. If I connect to Pastor Femi will give me an invite to the US, for instance, for people in Africa. It will give me access to his platform. People will begin to hear me. Some people connect to certain ministers for mentorship, mainly because they need access, mainly because they need platforms. Not because I know people who are submitted to some ministers they don't like, but they submit to those ministers because of platforms and access. I don't know if I'm making any sense here. People who don't like a particular minister, but they don't like the doctrine, they don't like what he teaches, what he preaches, but they are submitting to him because the minister has a bigger platform, because of what they could gain, because of connections, networks, recommendations, because of material, empirical, and physical gains, sometimes because of financial and economic gains. How do we see this in the light of the dangers of mentorship that we've seen all around today in ministry, even in the social spheres? Broadcast. Yeah. Right. 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 Yes, people just want Daddy Gio, Bishop Oyedepo, Joel Austin to mentor them, just mentioning those names, or people they think have influence. What people are looking for and the purpose of God for their lives sometimes could be in their local church pastor, could be in their community. But they, because of what they are looking for, which material is very cosmetic and superficial things, they look up to